10,000 research and manufacturing jobs could land in Canada if Ottawa adds the Swedish fighter jet to its military fleet.
We, as Saab, we are prepared to do that technology transfer to Canada and support that.
NATO's doorstep. The alliance is holding its largest military exercise in the Arctic since the Cold War.
The Gripen E operates with a new agile architecture system, which allows the aircraft to be upgraded with new tactics and new capabilities seamlessly.
Good evening. One of the largest defense contractors in Europe is making a play for a piece of this country's military market.
A quiet rotation at a windswept airbase in the North Atlantic rarely captures global attention. Yet on February 5th, something occurred that signaled a deeper shift within the world's most powerful military alliance. 6 Swedish JS-39 Gripen fighter jets rolled onto the tarmac at Keflavik Air Base in Iceland, replacing another NATO contingent in what appeared to be a routine deployment. However, beneath that ordinary exchange lay a significant milestone. Sweden was not present merely to observe or assist. It was stepping forward to lead, a move carrying implications far beyond Iceland's skies. When the 6 Gripens touched down, they joined a mission that has been running continuously since 2008. Although Iceland has been a NATO member since 1949, it maintains no standing air force of its own despite its strategic position between North America and Europe. With a population of around 380,000, the country occupies a critical location along the vital North Atlantic air and sea routes that connect the United States and Canada to the European continent. During the Cold War, Iceland's geography placed it at the heart of one of NATO's most sensitive strategic corridors, the Gjögr Gap connecting Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. Soviet submarines and long-range bombers moving from the Arctic into the Atlantic had to pass through this narrow passage, turning Iceland into a frontline surveillance outpost. That geography has not lost relevance. In fact, renewed Russian naval deployments and bomber patrols across the high north have restored its urgency. NATO's core principle remains unchanged under Article 5. An attack on one member is an attack on all. Yet Iceland fields no standing fighter aircraft of its own, creating a clear operational gap in alliance air defense coverage. The response came in the form of the Icelandic Air Policing mission established after Russian long-range aviation activity began rising again in the late 2000s. Allied nations rotate fighter detachments through Keflavik Air Base in peacetime, maintaining a continuous quick reaction alert presence. This is not symbolic patrol duty. It involves live scrambles, real-world intercepts, and direct coordination with NATO's integrated air command and control network. When unidentified aircraft approach Alliance airspace without filing flight plans or communicating with civilian controllers, fighters launch within minutes to identify and shadow them. Until recently, Belgian F-16AM Fighting Falcons from the 350th Fighter Squadron had been carrying out that responsibility. Stationed at Keflavik since November, their deployment concluded after another standard 3-month rotation. The transition that followed unfolded without disruption. Swedish aircraft arrived, Belgian crews departed, and mission readiness continued without pause. The handover reflected the maturity of NATO's standardized procedures. Aircraft swapped positions, maintenance logs transferred, command authority shifted smoothly. On the surface, it appeared routine. Strategically, it marked something far more significant. Sweden joined NATO in March 2024, ending more than 200 years of military non-alignment. Through 2 world wars and the entirety of the Cold War, Stockholm maintained neutrality while building a sophisticated domestic defense industry and a highly capable air force structured to defend Swedish territory independently. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 reshaped that calculus. Neutrality no longer offered sufficient assurance in a Europe where large-scale conventional war had returned. NATO membership provided collective defense guarantees, but it also required measurable contribution. Joining the alliance involves far more than signing accession documents. It demands technical interoperability, secure communications integration, standardized tactical procedures, and constant coordination with allied air commands. Pilots must operate under NATO rules of engagement. Aircraft must integrate seamlessly into alliance data links and command systems. Commanders must demonstrate the ability to assume leadership roles rather than remaining in supporting positions. By early 2026, Sweden had moved from new entrant to operational contributor. Iceland offered an ideal proving ground. The mission does not involve combat over hostile territory, yet it requires sustained readiness and credible deterrence. Russian Tu-95 and Tu-160 strategic bombers, alongside maritime patrol and reconnaissance aircraft, continue flying along NATO's northern approaches. They often operate in international airspace, but approach alliance boundaries without submitting flight plans or communicating with civilian air traffic control. NATO fighters scramble to identify them, ensuring transparency and signaling presence. Swedish pilots now conduct those intercepts under NATO command authority, leading an alliance rotation for the first time since accession. The aircraft performing this mission adds another layer of significance. The JAS-39 Gripen, developed by Saab, was designed for national defense under the assumption that Swedish air bases would be primary wartime targets. As a result, the Gripen can operate from short runways and even highway strips, refuel from mobile trucks, and be serviced by small ground teams. It is lighter and more cost-efficient than larger multi-role platforms such as the F-35 Lightning II, the Eurofighter Typhoon, or the Dassault Rafale, yet it integrates advanced avionics, modern radar, and secure data link capabilities that allow it to function effectively within NATO coalition operations. For the Icelandic mission, speed of response, reliable surveillance, and sustained patrol endurance are critical. The Gripen meets those demands. NATO's air policing network stretches from the Arctic Circle to the Mediterranean and from the Atlantic to the Black Sea. Continuous rotations are essential. No single member state can shoulder every deployment indefinitely. Burden sharing is not abstract diplomacy, it is operational necessity. Sweden's deployment to Iceland redistributes workload across the alliance, eases pressure on other air forces, and reinforces the credibility of collective defense in the North Atlantic. The timing of Sweden's leadership role arrives against a backdrop of sustained Russian military activity in the high north. Since 2008, Russian bomber flights near NATO airspace have not faded into history. They have become more consistent, more deliberate, sometimes flying coordinated patrol routes or practicing long-range maritime strike profiles that stretch deep into the North Atlantic. Each radar contact that cannot immediately be identified triggers a familiar sequence. Within minutes, quick reaction alert aircraft launch from Iceland, climbing into cold northern skies to intercept planes that may have departed from bases thousands of miles away. Now it is Swedish Gripens sitting on that alert line, armed, fueled, and ready. Swedish pilots remain on standby around the clock, prepared to scramble at a moment's notice. The intercepts themselves are conducted professionally and in accordance with international law. There is no drama in the radio calls, no theatrics in the escort, but the message travels clearly. NATO's northern flank is watched, it is defended, and it is defended by a nation that until recently stood outside the alliance structure. Beyond the operational rhythm lies a political reality that shapes every alliance decision. Military coalitions can fray when members feel that the burdens placed upon them exceed the benefits they receive. They can strain when hosting foreign forces appears to introduce new vulnerabilities instead of security. Iceland's air policing mission represents a different model. Iceland requests allied air defense support because it lacks its own fighter fleet. Contributing nations rotate in not out of obligation alone, but because participation sharpens their readiness and deepens interoperability. The alliance gains visible unity and distributes responsibility across members. Incentives align rather than clash. Sweden's deployment reduces Iceland's exposure instead of increasing it. Allied fighters deter potential incursions while providing rapid defensive response without transforming the island into a platform for offensive operations. That distinction carries weight in alliance politics. When missions are clearly defensive and mutually reinforcing, domestic support tends to hold. Long-term sustainability improves because the public understands the purpose. Another layer of significance emerges in the context of Nordic integration. Finland entered NATO in April 2023. Sweden followed less than a year later. Norway and Denmark have long operated within the alliance framework, while Iceland has been a founding member since 1949. With Finland and Sweden now fully integrated, the Nordic region sits inside a unified collective defense architecture. Apart from Greenland's unique constitutional status within the Kingdom of Denmark, regional alignment has simplified planning in ways that would have seemed complicated only a few years ago. Air forces can coordinate exercises without navigating the political sensitivities that once accompanied Swedish and Finnish non-alignment. They can share situational awareness more freely and design contingency plans with fewer diplomatic caveats. For Iceland, the expansion of Nordic NATO membership broadens the pool of geographically and culturally aligned contributors. Swedish and Finnish crews operate in similar climates. They understand Arctic and subarctic conditions not as abstract challenges, but as routine realities. Their participation strengthens NATO's northern tier not only in numbers, but in familiarity with the environment. The pace of Sweden's integration into alliance responsibilities stands out as well. Within less than 2 years of accession, Swedish forces assumed leadership of a standing NATO mission. That timeline suggests that Sweden's Air Force entered membership already aligned with many of the technical and procedural standards required for alliance operations. The Gripen platform required minimal adjustment to interface with NATO communication networks and identification systems. Swedish pilots transitioned into combined command structures without years of retraining. Rather than spending an extended period adapting on the margins, Sweden stepped quickly into a position of responsibility. At Keflavik, Swedish commanders coordinate daily with NATO's Combined Air Operations Center, aligning mission planning with alliance-wide intelligence assessments and airspace management directives. The detachment operates under established rules of engagement while retaining national command authority over its aircraft, reflecting the alliance's enduring balance between collective coordination and sovereign control. That balance defines how NATO functions in practice. It is neither a centralized military machine nor a loose political forum. It is a framework where national forces operate together without surrendering ultimate authority. On the ground in Iceland, the scene unfolds without spectacle. Maintenance crews move methodically between aircraft, inspecting airframes, checking systems, preparing jets for the next sortie. Pilots rotate through briefings, reviewing flight data and updated intelligence. Air traffic controllers monitor radar scopes that track civilian airliners crossing the Atlantic alongside military traffic, probing the edges of monitored airspace. The rotation proceeds with professionalism rather than ceremony. Yet every routine launch reinforces a principle that underpins the alliance itself. Collective defense is not a slogan embedded in treaty text. It is sustained through disciplined daily effort. The presence of the Gripen alongside more publicized fifth-generation aircraft highlights another practical truth. Stealth platforms such as the F-35 play a critical role in high-intensity conflict scenarios, but day-to-day air policing depends just as much on availability, cost efficiency, and rapid turnaround. A well-maintained fourth-generation multi-role fighter can identify and escort unknown aircraft effectively, preserving higher-end assets for other contingencies. NATO's strength lies in layered capability rather than reliance on a single technological edge. As Sweden leads this rotation, it demonstrates that modern collective defense rests not only on advanced systems, but on shared responsibility, interoperability, and the steady presence of aircraft ready to launch within minutes when radar screens demand a response. As Sweden leads this rotation, it sends a signal about credibility that extends beyond the immediate mission. Membership in an alliance carries expectations, and contributing to shared operations demonstrates that those expectations are understood. For Sweden, a country that built its defense identity on autonomy and non-alignment for more than 2 centuries, stepping into a leadership role within NATO marks a tangible shift in strategic posture. It is no longer positioned at the edge of collective structures, cooperating when convenient yet remaining formally outside. It is embedded within them, assuming operational responsibilities that shape the alliance's daily rhythm. In Iceland's skies, that shift becomes visible not through speeches or ceremonies, but through radar tracks and contrails stretching across the North Atlantic. When Russian aircraft approach the outer boundaries of NATO-monitored airspace, Swedish pilots now respond. They launch, identify, shadow, and report. The mechanics appear routine, almost procedural, yet they reflect the steady functioning of a collective defense system that depends on participation rather than dominance. The choice of aircraft also deserves attention because debate continues within defense circles about whether only fifth-generation fighters can meet modern security demands or whether advanced fourth-generation platforms still hold a vital role in real-world missions. The Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II often draws headlines for its stealth design, sensor fusion, and deep strike capabilities, representing the cutting edge of air combat technology inside NATO. Yet the deployment of the Saab 39 Gripen to Keflavik illustrates that not every operation requires low observability or penetration of heavily defended airspace. Air policing over the North Atlantic demands reliability in severe weather, endurance over vast stretches of open ocean, strong radar performance, secure communications, and sufficient weapons capacity to respond if circumstances escalate. The Gripen delivers those attributes at a significantly lower operating cost, enabling Sweden to field more aircraft and sustain deployments without overstretching its defense budget. Cost matters because presence matters. An air force composed exclusively of high-cost stealth platforms may struggle to maintain continuous overseas rotations while fulfilling national defense obligations at home. Sweden's model emphasizes affordability combined with modern capability, translating into aircraft that remain mission-ready in meaningful numbers. NATO benefits from that balance because alliance security relies on persistent coverage across multiple regions simultaneously. From the Baltic to the Black Sea and across the Arctic approaches, fighter detachments rotate through air policing missions that rarely command front-page attention, yet they form the backbone of collective defense. Not every sortie calls for the most advanced technology available. Many require aircraft that can launch quickly, identify unknown contacts, escort foreign bombers away from sensitive airspace, and return to base prepared for the next alert cycle. In Iceland, the Gripen fulfills that role effectively, reinforcing a broader pattern in how Sweden's position within NATO is evolving. The Icelandic mission may represent only one chapter, but it establishes habits that shape what follows. Participation in Baltic air policing, integration into NATO response force structures, and involvement in large-scale exercises across Europe become more seamless once operational routines are established. Each rotation builds familiarity with alliance command systems, shared data links, and multinational logistics networks. Each deployment strengthens relationships between Swedish personnel and counterparts from other member states. Over time, that steady cooperation transforms membership from a legal designation into lived experience. Alliances grow stronger through repetition and trust developed in routine settings rather than dramatic announcements. Swedish pilots coordinating with Icelandic controllers, maintenance teams synchronizing supply chains with NATO logistics hubs, and commanders engaging in planning sessions at Allied Air Command create patterns that reduce friction in future operations. Familiarity streamlines communication. Shared procedures minimize confusion. Professional relationships formed during quiet rotations can prove decisive in moments of crisis. This gradual deepening of integration helps explain how a nation that remained outside formal military alliances for more than 2 centuries can adapt to collective defense structures within a relatively short span. There is also a political dimension beneath the operational tempo. Sweden's decision to join NATO followed a reassessment of its security environment after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, concluding that neutrality no longer guaranteed sufficient protection. Membership emerged from domestic debate and strategic calculation rather than external imposition. Having made that choice, Sweden is now demonstrating commitment through action rather than rhetoric, leading missions and contributing capabilities that reinforce the credibility of collective defense across the alliance's northern frontier. Iceland demonstrates commitment to shared responsibilities in a way that reinforces Stockholm's credibility among its allies. Voluntary cooperation carries a durability that imposed arrangements rarely achieve because it rests on aligned interests rather than obligation alone. Iceland requires air defense coverage since it does not maintain its own fighter force. Sweden seeks to strengthen the alliance framework that now underpins its national security. NATO as a whole needs capable members willing to distribute operational burdens so that no single country absorbs a disproportionate share of the responsibility. When those interests overlap, deployments become mutually reinforcing instead of politically contentious. Iceland gains protection over its airspace and reassurance along vital Atlantic routes. Sweden gains operational experience, influence within alliance structures, and the opportunity to demonstrate reliability in real time. The alliance gains resilience through shared effort. That dynamic stands in contrast to situations where host nations question whether foreign forces increase their exposure without delivering equivalent security benefits. When perceived risks outweigh advantages, domestic resistance grows and cohesion weakens. In Iceland's case, the presence of Allied fighters is widely understood as defensive and stabilizing. The mission does not transform the island into a launchpad for offensive campaigns. It ensures that aircraft approaching NATO-monitored airspace are identified, tracked, and escorted when necessary. The strategic calculation tilts toward reassurance rather than vulnerability. Sweden's participation underscores how democratic states cooperate when they perceive tangible shared value. No external power compels this rotation. No coercive mechanism dictates Stockholm's involvement. Sweden evaluated its security environment, chose alliance membership after national debate, and now invests in that decision through visible contributions. That investment grants Sweden a stronger voice within NATO deliberations and reinforces its standing as a reliable partner in the Nordic region. It also signals to potential adversaries that the alliance's northern flank now includes newly integrated members prepared to shoulder meaningful responsibility rather than remain symbolic participants. Over the North Atlantic today, Swedish pilots sit on alert, prepared to launch within minutes when radar operators detect approaching aircraft requiring identification. These scrambles unfold without ceremony or televised coverage, yet they represent collective defense operating precisely as intended. Gripens climb into cold air, establish visual contact with long-range bombers or reconnaissance platforms, and escort them along established routes while maintaining professional distance. Interactions remain controlled and governed by international law as well as alliance procedures designed to prevent escalation. The message, however, is conveyed through action rather than rhetoric. In the broader sweep of NATO's history, milestones are often marked by treaties signed at summits, formal enlargements, or headline-grabbing strategic concepts. The daily reality of alliance strength, by contrast, lies in aircraft flying routine patrols and personnel executing demanding tasks without fanfare. Sweden's leadership in Iceland illustrates that transformation from non-alignment to integration is not measured solely by accession documents, but by the willingness to assume responsibility. A nation once defined by strategic autonomy now operates confidently within collective frameworks, contributing a platform that complements higher-end assets such as the F-35 while expanding the alliance's capacity to sustain persistent presence. The significance of this rotation therefore extends beyond 6 aircraft on a windswept runway. It reflects how shared interests, practical capability, and steady participation reinforce deterrence in regions where geography magnifies strategic importance. In Iceland's skies, credibility is not declared. It is flown sortie by sortie as alliance members demonstrate that collective defense endures through consistent commitment rather than dramatic gestures.